This is episode 28.
Of all the horrible things, baby. Here we go. We're talking Sandman.
We are. Welcome back.
It was dropped 1 week ago today.
Yes.
And we managed to bust through the 10 episodes that we had thought were the 10 episodes
right
until today.
Which was they released a surprise episode, 11.
Surprise! I mean, it's fitting for this series because I do feel like each episode really is kind of its own beast.
Yeah. Yes.
So what I've learned, I haven't watched the 11th yet.
No.
You haven't either because we just found out about it before the cast. It doesn't sound like it's as relevant to the 10 from season 1.
Okay.
So we're not going to worry about it today. Forgive us. We're going to talk first reactions though.
Yes. So out of the gate here, I'd like to say that I've never read the graphic novel, so I'm only coming at this from an adapted version point of view, which apparently Neil Gaiman was very heavily involved in.
Okay.
So if it was to stray from the graphic novel, he was aware of it and probably gave his blessing, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Having said that, I was a little confused by just overall tone and who this was for. I kind of felt well. Here, I'll say because
for me. I'm telling you, it's for me.
All right, because I kind of felt like it was made like young adult. There, I said it.
Yeah, I mean that is the nature of my brain.
Fairly even,
young in there. But in terms of my opinion, I had a period in my life where I did read a lot of graphic novels, and I did read some of this. Gotcha. I didn't love it in graphic novel form, but I did really enjoy it on Netflix.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just my sensibilities have changed. One of my big issues with the graphic novels just wasn't my art style. So I really had trouble getting into it. And admittedly, the show is a bit convoluted and there's so many characters and so many shifting plot lines that it worked for me visually, but when I was reading it, it was not fun. I enjoyed it on the screen, but it was really kind of it felt like homework reading a graphic novel, and that's not great. Now, I've got to say this is something that I've experienced with Gaiman before because I attempted American Gods and I couldn't get into that.
Same.
But I love the show, so I don't know. I think he's amazing at this world building. I'm just wondering if his actual execution on his own on the page, it doesn't work for me as much as it does, obviously, for other people because they love him. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is this was supposed to be the one of his that was never to be adapted because it was so hodgepodgey within the. That's why I'm not surprised this new episode just dropped because it is consistent with what the graphic novel was. It's not super fluid, you really have to invest in it and focus.
Agreed. And before we get into just the season overall, you mentioned you like the look of it, but did you have any issues with actually how it was filmed? Because you noticed the frame, like it was pulled slightly up to give almost this narrow look. And
I didn't notice that, but now that you say it, I think that's maybe appropriate given the nature of dreams when you're kind of just like it's kind of tunnel vision within your brain.
I completely understand that, and if it was just in those dreamland scenes, I would have accepted it as well. But it was throughout, and
it bothered you, huh?
Well, here's the thing: it didn't massively bother me because I got like kind of just used to it. But apparently, a lot of viewers have a big issue with it.
I'm kind of shocked because I didn't really even notice anything was going on with the framing. Maybe I should be looking at that stuff more than I was, but I didn't notice it. I mean, I got enraptured pretty quick.
Well, that's good.
So
I will also say this though. I was a huge fan of the settings. And like, so if we're talking look overall, I thought they were fantastic.
I did too. And this definitely had the potential to be more like a video game. And I felt with a few exceptions, there were some CGI moments that I didn't like at all. And specifically one character that just drove me crazy. Felt like I was suddenly shifting into a Disney movie.
Okay. I already think I know.
Yes. I did feel like it was the best they could do, with creating a dream space. I mean, this
Right.
is coming from somebody who's obsessed with dreams. So, as noted before the cast, I think it was speaking to me because I am so invested in Dream Fair. Having written the novel, of course, it was going to come up during this cast
Oh, yeah, of
about the
course.
dream recording industry of the future. Company Dreamer on Amazon. I never plug people, but if there's any time for me to plug,
You
it's during
should. You
the
should.
Sandman. What I loved about this is that it, unlike mine, which is rooted in the real world pretty much only, the dreams are just the form of currency in my novel in the dream
Right.
recording industry. But this really allows you to dive into the dreams in a way I didn't really think was possible when I was initially writing my story.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me excited what they were able to do, because it's notoriously known that any producer, any person you're trying to sell a story to about dreams is going to brush you off, because Dream Fair doesn't sell.
Right.
I think, especially in the theater, I think Sandman is working now and was #1 for the week or whatever. It got knocked out this week by Never Have I Ever or something.
Sounds right.
But yeah, I think it does work now because of how advanced the CGI is. And you have a cast. I mean, these are the all-star English actors we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like every single episode you were getting another awesome player from Game of Thrones. You know what I mean? The first episode you have the father from Game of Thrones.
Yeah, Charles
and then of course,
Dance.
yes, he's amazing.
Actor.
He's so good, especially because the first episode, I think people could maybe abandon the show based on the first episode.
Agreed. It feels
because
very
it feels
long.
different than the rest of the series.
Yes.
And it's a little snoozier, I guess you could say, than the rest of the season. That being, we don't even have Dream talk at all in this first episode, really much at all. I mean, once he's captured,
right,
he doesn't say anything. I mean, that's part of it. But I do think that what kept me going with it was how amazing the performances were.
Yeah, and what would you think or say about the lead, Sandman, his performance throughout the series?
Okay, Tom Sturges, I have never seen in anything before.
Me neither.
I initially remember when I saw the casting announcement a year or so ago, whenever it was, I was a little confused. Okay. I bought into him by the end of it. I was on board with him. The hair drives me a little nuts.
Yeah.
Way too emo.
Very emo.
And actually, I don't know if you noticed, but it's inconsistent in the cut throughout.
I didn't.
I mean,
but I believe you.
The king of dreams, so he can make his hair whatever he wants at any time. But I thought he was, with the exception of the emo vibe, really appropriate for the role, especially given the other endless that we've seen. I felt like he really did encapsulate kind of this master of illusion, master of dream quality in his performance and his very subdued dialogue, or what would you say that his the way he spoke,
like his own cadence and
yes,
yeah,
his delivery. The delivery I felt like was appropriate for the dream master, because it's easy to forget that he's also the master of nightmares too. So he's got to walk that fine line. He can't be super sunny. He is still. It's what's interesting about him in terms of the endless is he does have his hand kind of in both sides of it. So when we're talking about the endless, we're talking about destiny, death, dream, desire, despair, delirium, and then the prodigal, which I had to look up. Did they mention who the actual prodigal was in the series?
I don't believe so. I don't think so.
And that, of course, is destruction.
Right.
Which I think he's missing, because when he shows up, isn't that like the end of everything? Destruction? I'm looking forward to what they do.
Right. And that is something to consider, and then we'll talk about it more at the end, is that this was just the first season. And apparently this covers the first 2 graphic novels.
Okay. How many are there?
I don't know. Certainly enough for multiple seasons here. And I will say, I didn't know much about this going in. So when I watched the first episode, I was still pulled in as far as like the story goes, even though the first episode does kind of like, where are we going with this? But I really do like how each episode felt very different. I have 3 that really stood out that I really enjoyed. And there's a couple that I just did not care for. Like episode 2,
Yeah. With Joanna Constantine.
With
you didn't love her, huh?
Well, I would also say Cain and Abel.
Cain and Abel was a low point. I don't like either. It felt just so out of place. In Cain and Abel, I know it's not supposed to be the biblical version,
right?
But I mean, you can't not associate that. That's one of the things that kind of does drive me a little crazy about it, is that it does blend maybe too much theology and mythos. You know, right. I'm all for rooting. You can pull from all the mythos, but the second you start bringing in theological stuff, it drives me a little up the wall. And I feel like Cain and Abel was the worst example of that. Plus, I just didn't like the actor that much. I'm sorry. I like the dragon, the gargoyle.
The gargoyle was fun. Was really interesting because it was immediately sad. That's like, you don't even like, a lot of the characters in this series did have a ton of great backstory, but to what you just said, it probably could have helped to explain a little bit more about Cain and Abel, because not everybody is familiar with the characters. Not everyone has, studied. I mean, I'm certainly familiar with them, but yeah, I think it was a low point to what you said.
I agree with you. I honestly think that the mid part of the season was the best. And the standout episode is certainly David DeLuis's a singular episode in the diner. Nothing comes close to that.
24/7 is the name of the episode. It's my favorite. Yes.
But the Corinthian was formidable. Yes. And I felt like after we lose David DeLuis's character, Johnny D, it still sustained enough momentum for me to really enjoy it. But I will not argue with the fact that the first 3 episodes really aren't great.
Correct. Well, and that would bring us to episode 4, and I don't want to skip over things too much, but yeah, what was your impression of, because I heard that it was pretty similar to the graphic novel, like the whole sequence in hell. Okay. Although certain things were changed, like even in the dialogue, like this version in the TV series mentions that the billions of what did she call them? Demons of hell. And in the graphic novel, it's only referenced as millions. And I'm like, why change little things like that?
Yeah. I actually really enjoyed it, especially in comparison to the episodes that preceded it.
Yes.
I remember seeing the top of the episode, the Hope in Hell or whatever. I'm like, all right, here comes a good episode, because we're going to be in hell. And this is the first episode where we really have that amazing subplot of David DeLuis being picked up by Rosemary on the street, and the dread of that claustrophobia of being in that car together really worked for me. What also worked, I mean, David DeLuis is freaking amazing in everything he does.
He's great.
But the amulet of protection, anytime somebody tried to kill him, was so fun. Yes. Anytime somebody's
like his
busting
escape,
like that, or what? Oh my gosh,
his escape was
was really fun. And he's always trying to save people too. He's like, I wouldn't do that if I was you. My suggestion would be to exist.
Yeah.
I really dug that, but I didn't necessarily understand his motives as we moved into the next episode, based on what we had seen in the episode with him and Rosemary, where it does seem like he has a little bit of empathy and sympathy, and he gives her at the end of that the amulet of protection, right? Isn't that because he's a character who's obsessed with getting rid of the lies in the world, right?
Yes.
Isn't it in a way like the amulet of protection a lie, because that's a lie to be immortal? You know what I mean? The amulet itself is contrary to nature. I don't know. It sometimes his character just felt hypocritical, and I didn't really understand, especially like at the end of the diner episode, where everyone's slaughtering each other, and then the only one that's left is the waitress. And he's like, and she's like, "How is this a better world?" He's like, "Well, you need to stop using your eyes and embrace the darkness." And then of course it's a fun scene where she stabs out her eyes. In terms of horror, that episode can't be beat.
Correct.
But
that is something I want to talk about.
Didn't get what he thought would be his end goal here. I mean, made for an amazing episode. such a different tone from the rest of the show too. So eerie, the one location. All of the characters were so fleshed out in that episode too, almost more so than larger characters like, let's say, Lita. I hate Lita. Am I the only one that hates Lita with the ghost baby?
No, weird, very weird.
She had a much bigger part than certainly all the ones that were in this singular episode. But as much as I love David Lewis, I did feel like they could have figured out that character's motivations a little bit more, especially like once Dream kind of is messing with him when they're like fighting for the ruby at the end of that episode, and like there's like this weird bit where he's like chasing after his mom, but the mom is wearing the helm, and I don't know. It just it once again started like bringing Freudian stuff in there, and I felt like it hadn't earned that with his character yet. I don't know.
No, I agree, and I think a lot of that episode has to deal with going back to episode 1 and seeing what his father and grandfather like went astray, and I will say that they did tie it together nicely, but I 100% agree with you that his goals could have been a little bit I don't know, a little bit more explained better.
Yeah, because I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. Because 24/7, that episode was my favorite. I don't know. I mean, I'm also wondering if there could have been a better conclusion with, it really makes me think now because I'm rewinding in my head. His father was also put like in a forever like nightmare, wasn't he?
Yes. No, that's not his father. That's his brother. The brother was put in the forever nightmare. His father's actually dead because
you're right.
It's the old man, Robert Sturgis, right?
You're right.
He's the one that fathered the child, and he wanted to have David Lewis, Johnny D, aborted. But then she ran away with the ruby, and that's okay. This is another big issue for me is they only allude to what happened with his altering the ruby. And then when he's talking to Rosemary in the car about, my mom had me locked up because I stole the ruby. And because of arsony. And because of murder.
Murdered
it's a funny scene because it's just like compounding, and you see Rosemary just like shitting herself. But I guess I don't understand how he has the power to alter that ruby. That is never touched upon.
That could have been explained so well at all. I was going to say so much better, but you're right, at all, because he drops that to his mom. Oh no, I mended it or whatever. How? How? It's not like
he's a mortal man.
Lamp.
Exactly. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, granted, maybe he got that book that his dad had at the beginning.
That's true.
Maybe he's able to. But I could have used a little backstory on that and what actually happened after they'd run away, or she'd run away and given birth to him. And I mean, ultimately, she's the one that had traded the bag of sand for the amulet of protection.
Right.
I don't know. I just felt like there was holes in there, and for such an amazing character to just have such huge aspects of plot just dropped in a couple lines was troubling for me, to say the least.
No, I agree. And
here's a question for you. Do you think it would have been stronger if they just did book 1? You're telling me that they did book 1 and book 2 in this.
That's what I understand. That is what I
Or if they took book 1 and flashed it out a little bit more, or would that be too banal?
I don't know, because I mean, some of my other favorite episodes may be from the second book, which I'll just say the Sound of Her Wings and Collectors are my two other favorite episodes.
Yeah.
And if they weren't included in this first season, I may have not liked the season at all. To my point, that
I could see that.
I think there was some really great standout episodes.
You know what? And I think that's why I probably didn't get as invested into the graphic novel as I did the show, because it seems like the Corinthian stuff at the end with the serial convention was probably book 2 stuff. I mean, I'm just guessing, but I'm assuming it was, because it did have such a different vibe than what was going on at the beginning with the Ruby stuff, you know?
Right.
And I wasn't entirely clear on how when the Ruby was destroyed, like he didn't need it anymore.
I know.
That seemed cheap.
Agreed.
I guess.
Like, so he'd always needed it, and then he learned that he didn't. I agree. There's kind of there's some key.
I mean, you gotta keep the plot moving, but
right. But Neil Gaiman is fantastic at world building.
Yes,
these are things that probably have answers that just weren't included.
Yeah, that's true. And there's a couple quotes that I wrote down because this one is relevant to the Ruby situation. When Lucifer says, "Tools are the most subtle traps. We become dependent on them, and they're in their absence. We're vulnerable, weak, and helpless."
Mm-hmm.
Which I loved because I didn't like that he had these tools. It made his power seem marginalized in a way.
I completely agree.
Okay, let's talk about the helm really quick. What did you think about his mask?
Well, I thought it looked cool when he's first introduced, but like to what you just said, yeah, I was a little confused as to why he needed these things.
I wasn't sure exactly what the helm did either. If I were to try and remember, I would say that it allowed him to move through the dreams without having to jump into that dark pool like he did. It just enabled his traveling more than anything else.
Right. And let's not forget that these items are what set the story into motion, really, where there's a reason now he needs to go to hell because the demon. So were they just tools, storytelling tools? And then, and that's why they're so easily like forgotten later. Like, oh, I don't need these things. Tough.
Speaking of the helm, let's talk about his battle with Lucifer.
Right.
First of all, let's talk about the demon that had acquired the helm.
Yeah.
That was one of the I didn't really love the way that he was portrayed with the mohawk and stuff. Agreed. There are some moments in here where it just felt cheesy WBE demon-y, while other parts felt really mature.
That's what I'm getting at here.
Fresh.
That I felt this felt very like Sabrina, the teenage witch. It almost felt like they used the same makeup and monster design, creature design, or the same team, and that's why it felt so young adult. I mean, you're in hell, and we should fear these demons, and this guy shows up like a prankster.
I mean, yeah, no demon should have a mohawk ever. Mohawks should no. I mean, unless it is part of being in hell, where everyone is cursed with a mohawk,
with an 80s hairdo.
Yeah. But anyway, so he gets to pick who is going to fight for him for the helm.
Right.
Or Dream is stuck there in hell. There's just, if they are brother and sister, I don't understand I mean, granted, this is fiction, right? You got to suspend your disbelief. But is there any chance he's ever going to be subjugated to hell and under his sister's wing, as it were? It was one of those things where it's like, it's predictable. There was times where it was predictable. And I didn't love the battle.
No. What was really confusing to me is that they were yelling out to this, legion, if you will, of people that are supposed to be watching it. And how were they watching it? They're up in a tower. Like, are there like jumbotrons in hell?
Yeah, exactly. Hunger Games-esque jumbotrons on the
that part bothered me. I'm like, get down there and in the thick of it instead of your
it would have been so cool if they were surrounded by the demons and stuff.
That's what I was hoping for, and that to me seemed like a really weird budgetary thing. Where like you had the money and you've got these great visual effects, and then you're not using them in the scene. Or to the extent.
They skimped at weird times, and in hell, I don't think that's an episode you should skimp on.
No, that should have been like 2 episodes, like spawn over, because there's so much cool things happening in there. The long trip he has to take up that mountain. He finds one of his old lovers is in prison.
Let's stop there for a second. Explain to me this old lover. Because why is this the only time that he looks different?
I don't know. They don't explain that either. So are we supposed to believe that at one point he was just a man and then became this
I don't know
deity
about that.
Or whatever?
I took from it because she's one of like the first humans, right? And then
Yeah.
he was, so this is Nada we're talking about, who he comes across in the prison in hell. And then he is to her Kaikachil.
Right.
And apparently he had lived in the real world with her. Am I mistaken on that?
I'm tracking.
It's
That's
just not,
exactly what I thought.
Okay, that's what I thought too. But apparently he betrayed her, or vice versa.
Vice versa. Because he wasn't able to forgive her.
Right.
But why? Her sin was so bad that she's in hell for eternity?
Yeah. I guess this is another instance of too little context for something that might have had a better payoff if we had any inkling of what the hell was really going on. Because really the only thing that had a payoff in that moment was how the demon was taking him like the long way around.
Yeah, on
purpose. To get to Lucifer
mess
and
with him.
Exactly. That I dug. It's not like that demon was that intricate of character himself.
No, but, although he is one of those guys you see in almost every action movie, like at the beginning of the movie Troy, he is definitely the guy across the field that Brad Pitt runs and stabs in the neck. That really? Has to be the same actor. That man is a monster of a human.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool that he was like the guy at the gate and the tunnel and so cool.
I did like his interaction with Dream, specifically Dream, like when he responds to the demon saying, where's your bling, dude? You know, where the stuff that makes you? And Dream still had the wherewithal to be like, mind your tongue, dude. I'm gonna have it again. I'm gonna be at top of my game again. I just thought they had a really fun interplay for such a small part. And I mean, come on, the when at the gate of hell with the people on the walls. Yeah. Granted, it's a trope you've seen before, but I thought it was effective.
It looked really cool, but that's my problem. It looks really cool, very terrifying, and we get into hell, and it's not as bad as the gate.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
These are supposed to be tortured souls. Now, there was a brief scene where they cut through the forest, and there's those trees.
Oh yeah,
those were really effective too.
I thought. Cool. You're right. Yeah, the people kind of sewn into the trees.
Yeah, like that's how you're spending eternity. Very
brings
cool.
me to another
not so
issue
bad.
that I had with it.
Okay.
Not even specifically hell, but I love Patton Oswalt. Yeah. I love him. I didn't think he was cast appropriately. It again brought the seriousness of the show down. 100%. We don't need comedic relief in this show. I don't think he was even really comedic relief much at all. So when you associate
wasted talent,
a comic voice with a raven, it just really kind of bothered me. Because
I was thinking the same thing, and to me, what it was the equivalent of is getting a big name, great voice actor for like a Pixar movie or an animated show. You use those comedic talents to your strengths. This seemed like a fan, like Patton Oswalt was like, I want to be in your show. Neil. Give me something. And they're like, all right.
Make him Cain and Abel. That would have been way better.
Yes.
Give him that role. I mean, I wanted to like Matthew the Raven as much as I like Jessamy, who's only in 2 episodes and does she talk? His initial Raven, I felt way more for than Matthew, who was, MODOK. It didn't work for me as much as I love Pat, and it didn't work. Let's talk about the other character that drove me up the wall. That really felt like it was straight out of Disney.
Yeah.
And that's Pumpkinhead. I don't know what is his name.
Jack Skellington. I mean, this guy's right out of Tim Burton. Like what?
So he's like the maintenance man in The Dreaming.
Really weird choice. Plucked from another movie, dropped right into the series. No explanation.
No. I mean, is he a dream or is he a nightmare? And why does he have a grumpy New Yorker voice?
Right. Like he's a cab driver.
The voice casting was off on this.
Agreed.
It definitely was.
But to your point, suspension of disbelief, to a certain extent, right? Like the Cain and Abel thing. This is going back to what we were talking about earlier. Why there's no, what it is? It's just like I don't know if you ever saw those episodes of South Park where they're in like the dream or like the fantasy or Imagination Land,
Okay, yeah.
And it's basically anything you can think of, and it's too broad. It's come on, narrow this in at least for season 1. Start introducing some crazy characters in the additional seasons, but it was all over the place. It seemed very juvenile.
It did. I think ultimately they had to have that character for making Lucien's character a little more fleshed out. And actually, I think Lucien is one of the better written characters in the entire series.
Yes.
Totally got behind her and her struggle with essentially getting the respect from Dream that she deserves. And the interplay between Pumpkinhead, Matthew, and her, I felt like it was necessary for her character, but I just think, again, it could have been done with a little more finesse and with a little more seriousness than turning it into, Pixar, like you said. I mean, and honestly, that was the worst CGI of the entire series was Pumpkinhead.
Yes.
He just looked so cartoony.
What was his name? I really want to know. Like,
I don't know.
Does it another name like Matthew?
I don't. I didn't pay attention. I just put grumpy New Yorker.
Yeah, again, when I think of Neil Gaiman, I think of some really dark stuff, and I don't think, almost cartoonish, family friendly. I gotta find out. I'm on here now, so.
And he's wearing freaking overalls. I just can't take him serious.
No, here's all cast and crew. I mean, I'm trying to figure out. Will I even know who it was? Oh, here, Nicholas. I can't even say this actor's last name. He's playing Merv Pumpkinhead. And so you're not even far off when you said that.
Mervin.
And this actor is just playing the body, it says. Merv Pumpkinhead body. Because he was not the actual. Yeah, we get that.
Yeah.
I mean, which also might mean that there's another voice actor for that part. I don't know, man.
It's funny because you definitely are making me rethink things, because I really enjoyed the whole of it. The whole of it I got on board with, because in a weird way, it was almost like a Masters of Horror meets Twilight Zone, in that every episode really did have its own feel.
Yeah.
But looking back at the entirety of it, it does feel a little convoluted. And
right. And I think it might be as simple as like, and I haven't even looked to see how many different directors were on this project. It might be just a problem with tone, and not like certain episodes being, I don't want to say just better, but they were, the episode that stands out to me is when Sandman is with the start of the episodes with his sister, who's basically the Grim Reaper,
Right,
and
death, for sure.
Death. And the way they set up that whole storyline, and then we get the second half of that episode where the man in the tavern, and then they keep checking back every 100 years.
I didn't understand this man in the tavern situation.
So
what was the point of that, and how did that have any relevance to the rest of the series?
So to me, the point was our Sandman character needs to realize the joys of actually living, Okay. And the other thing that I think
he builds his empathy and sympathy for humanity.
Yes, and that's why,
and to help him be a better dream maker.
Yeah. And that guy who was the guy in the tavern ended up being your comedic relief, really. But
that's true.
The thing that was really weird, which could have been cooler, was they introduced that Constantine character and they threw it away.
Yeah.
I imagine this character will come back in like season 2, and we'll see more from Constantine, which is again plucked from another body of work, in my opinion.
Yeah, you can't help but associate it with the Constantine that most people know. I struggle with that episode as well, but I do like the bag of sand, and I like what that did to her ex-lover. Mm-hmm. Essentially, this becomes like a metaphor for drug addiction, right? Where she's just lost in fantasy and wasting away because of it. Here's what I forgive a lot of this series sins for, is that because it is Gaiman, there is so much philosophy underneath it that I can handle a small character with a cheesy pumpkin head.
Right.
Or not really understanding Johnny D's motives, because I know in the end it's really asking questions like, is it better to lie a white lie or to be completely honest with someone?
Right.
These deeper questions that are at the heart of it, I think, is what makes it a potentially lasting series. And I'm hoping they see the error of the first season and really bring it with the second season and maybe focus a little bit more. It needed more focus.
Yeah, I mean, to just add on to what you were saying right there, the episode I was just describing, and you're asking what it's about. It's just about, humans finding the value and the joys, the simple joys in life. When that one character, he mentions, in the 1500s, he's doing incredibly well and he's making a lot of money. Right. But then he loses his wife and his son, but he still enjoyed that time. He's like, "Are you ready to die?" No, I still enjoyed my life. Yeah. He even enjoyed, being poor, because he still learned valuable lessons there. But it's just to add on to your point that Neil Gaiman does have this bigger message. The real storyline through Sandman are how are people living their lives, and are they doing a good job, or are they being selfish? But I think a lot of it's getting lost. Those messages are getting lost in the fantastical arc of the whole thing.
I agree. And they're getting lost just because this is the first time we're meeting this character in episode, 4 or 5? One is, 6. Is that 6?
Yeah.
Suddenly we're meeting this new character that is his friend. Right. Ultimately at the end of it, he's his friend, and then we don't deal with him again. So it really becomes hard to care about him unless you're watching that episode looking for those deeper meanings, which most people aren't. So,
but there also might be callbacks where maybe we're being impatient because this is a large body of work here. And
if we look at it like Game of Thrones, I think we would be more forgiving of characters like that in Game of Thrones than maybe we are in this. And I think that's possibly because it's so obviously Dream's story in a way that Game of Thrones wasn't obviously anyone's one story.
Right.
So I think that's when you get a little problematic by adding these compared to a Game of Thrones. I'm gonna going back on my own point here. When you have such a central figure, I feel like peppering in stuff doesn't work as well as it does in a Game of Thrones or something.
I mean, I hate to tell people not to watch this show because there are a lot of great things in it, but we might be, a few years from now looking back as a cohesive story, and it might pull together a lot better.
I hope so.
So some people might want to wait and binge the whole series and really enjoy it. I don't know.
I wouldn't say it's for casual viewers on Netflix.
No,
you know what I mean? This is for somebody who loves fantasy and wants something a little out of the ordinary and to think more. As long as they're willing to get past the WB stuff. Yeah. Hey, don't get me wrong. I actually really liked Sabrina. I know you didn't get through all of it, right?
Oh no, I did. Okay. Yeah, I was a big fan of Sabrina, but I knew what it was going into it. I knew it was, they were also tying it into very lightly into the Riverdale show that I've never seen and will never watch.
Nor will I. And I guess she's actually popped up in the new Riverdale show.
I have heard that.
It's old as hell now. But that's a good point because they're both are based on comics, but one just has a much more clear tone. And I feel like as much as I love Tom Sturges as Dream, he just encompasses the seriousness that the show deserves, and then to be surrounded by silly stuff it does mess with the integrity of the show, I guess.
Right. Well, but also on the other side of the coin there, that Sabrina is about a teenage girl, you know, so you kind of know what you're getting before jumping into that show.
And he's the opposite of that. And he's endless. He's
endless.
Old as Methuselah. So I get that. I definitely do. I would have liked a better understanding. This goes back to episode 1 and 2 of the sleeping sickness. So Dream gets sucked away from the world, right? He's in his little bulb, and people will fall asleep but not wake up.
Right.
I didn't understand. So are people not dreaming at all during this time? There's no dreams, no nightmares during this whole 100 years?
I think that's true, because when we learn about the great-grandmother, which I also thought they were throwing that away, and then we meet the great-grandmother who...
Yeah, Unity Kincaid.
Yeah, we learn that also she met somebody and had a child. which also was kind of dangerous grounds right there. Like, wait a minute, you were asleep and then you had
I know.
a baby.
So you're bringing up Desire here, and Desire was another one of those characters where I saw what they were trying to do with his tone, but it didn't work for me. I don't know if it did for you. I get what they were going for, and I thought Despair was probably better. I loved it when she's digging in her own cheek with the hook.
Oh yeah,
that was fun.
Oh yeah,
but she didn't have any real payoff. I know Desire invites her over, and they discuss taking down Dream together, but then we don't see her at all for the rest of the series,
right?
And we don't understand really why does Desire want to take down Dream. Is it just jealousy? I'm assuming
it has to be, because they do have a conversation at the end where it kind of comes out that way. You know, it's like a siblings bickery, but like you really had the Desire played it off as if like, oh, I wasn't really all that serious. I made you mad. Like, no, you almost destroyed him. So there's got to be something else. Desire is like classically desiring a different lifestyle or jealous. I don't know.
Let's talk about what would have happened then if he did kill Rose, who does have the blood of the Endless in her. Does that then start a war between the Endless, or does that...
Well,
it was unclear to me the ramifications of Desire tricking him into killing Rose instead of Unity as the Vortex, simply because she was half and Desire, half Endless. What would that do? It was clear that Dream was pissed off and felt like that was something that was unacceptable and could have destroyed everything, or I wasn't clear why that mattered, other than maybe he's killing one of his own bloodline, and then does destruction come into the picture? I don't know. That wasn't clear for me either, and I feel like there was kind of a weird scene between him and Dream, because I'm sorry, Desire and Dream at the end, where Dream was like, I'm not going to consider you family if you do anything like this again. Because then for the third or fourth time in the whole series, you have Desire talking to us.
Right.
I hated that. It's the only character who does that, but I also felt breaking the camera or fourth wall, but not in this context.
No, and it also felt very Disney to me too. Mirror, mirror on the wall type of a situation. And
yes, thank you. But the first time we're introduced to him was like the worst, because it's just like him on the street watching Dream, like, brother. It was just the guy was way too hammy for me. It didn't work.
Yeah. The performance was I mean, could have been a little bit more grounded. But I think ultimately, they talk about the worlds sort of like combining, like
oh yes.
So I think what they were trying to do there, because hell, and we learned that hell and Satan also want to do something about Dream embarrassing hell. But I think what they're trying to establish there is almost anything bad that would happen to Dream would ultimately remove that layer or veil, if you will.
Okay.
And then, hell on earth.
Yeah. That part is very cool. That world building aspect is amazing. And when you talked about them kind of squandering hell, maybe it was to set up that, like, one of the last scenes where we do have Lucifer saying, okay, let's break down the barriers and make the dreaming part of hell. It was a really cool character of just like the eyes in that black rift.
Yeah.
That didn't bother me. I mean, it could have, I think, gone the way of Pumpkinhead or something, but I wasn't expecting it. It just was something I hadn't seen before as a being. So I really enjoyed it, and I liked the idea of, hey, if we can't leave hell, let's make everything hell. That's cool.
Right.
I dug that.
And I think that may have been one of the best parts about setting up an additional season, was actually having Lucifer saying, oh, my generals want me to do something. Okay, I'll do something. And you're like, okay, something from season 1 is going to pay off, because like the conclusion of this first season was very kind of anticlimactic, and you're thinking, why would I watch more of this?
I completely agree. The finale left me wanting, and it wasn't your usual wham bam, holy cow, what a finale. It was really fractured, I felt, more than anything, and trying to cram in too much. for the next season, perhaps. Because what we do have, Lucifer's going to come after Dream now,
Mm-hmm.
and you got Desire still looking to draw blood. And then you got these other characters that are just referred to, like Delirium. I can't wait to meet Delirium because one of the throwaway lines that probably a lot of people catch is Dream is all like, "And poor Delirium." So Delirium is this really tragic figure that I'm just dying to meet.
Yeah,
I think that could be really fun. And then the other one we don't meet is Destiny, which really also intrigues the hell out of me. Did you notice all the artifacts? I love artifact stuff too, with all the artifacts on the wall. And you got the one in the middle that's missing. That's Destruction. Who knows what?
Are you talking in Dream's layer or whatever?
This is something that I think is going on. So we see it most predominantly with Desire's background. He's got that red lavish realm.
Oh, right.
And then in the background, you see the icons for each person. And essentially, I feel like that is their means of communication. Because if you remember, then we see something very similar, but in The Dreaming, where that's how he contacts Desire at the end was essentially there's the red heart. Right. There's a red heart that actually looked a lot like the heart that came out of Rose that she gave to Unity, which helped them assess it. Man with the Golden Eyes is the one who made her. But I do love the iconography. I'm sorry, but I do. Because you got the book there, and that has to be Destiny. You got the fertility cross representing death, which I'm not quite clear on, but I guess death is renewal at the same time, so I can get on board with it. What did confuse me a little bit is you got the mask there, but the mask looked different in Desire's realm.
Right.
It looked like more like those old-timey plague masks.
Yes,
you know what I mean? It didn't have like the didn't it kind of look like a spine at the bottom?
It looked like a gas mask that was created from like a spine.
Yeah. It was very cool, but that wasn't the way that it looked in Desires. It was more pointy and less bony.
Which and is then you got, really good world building. Like if they all have their own perspective of each other.
Yeah, that is cool. I dug that. You got the hook in a box for Despair, which obviously we see her ripping into her own cheek with. And then Delirium's was cool. Did you notice that it's like this weird green cloud of unknowing?
Yeah.
I dug it. And of course, I'm just dying to know what Destruction's iconography would be.
Right. Yeah, no, there again, I think Neil Gaiman's maybe one of the best, aside from like George R.R. Martin, as far as like creating a world out of like nothing and making it so vast.
Right.
But yeah, there are some problems. But I didn't even talk about my other favorite episode, my third favorite episode, which I don't know if we'll continue to see it in another season. But the Collectors.
Oh my gosh!
And at the convention, the cereal convention, was so fun and gross and just.
And Jed, like, for a cereal convention, I sure expected to be more cereal.
Yeah.
It was great. I mean, to be set up in that hotel for the convention and have all these psychos just like all worshiping the Corinthian too.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about his eyes. What do you think is going on with those eyes?
Oh, they're teeth.
Like, what's the meaning? They are teeth. Yeah, it's like he's got 3 mouths on his face, essentially.
I don't know if I know the meaning yet. I'm just
assuming it's like an eater of hope. Yeah.
That's swallow your soul. Like, and also he steals other people's
eyes. He steals people's eyes, but then he eats them. But you don't actually see him eating them. So I'm guessing he puts them into his eyes and eats the eyes with his.
Which is a really cool idea.
It's so fun to think about that. Yeah.
And I really liked when he was destroyed. There was like a tiny skull that he just kept.
That was cool.
And he's going to create another Corinthian one day. I thought that stuff was really fun.
That was cool. I loved what was going on with that. And actually, another character that we didn't mention that I really ended up liking a lot was Fiddler's Green.
Oh yeah.
He's so serious. Yeah, he's so good. I did take a little issue with how he's a place and then able to turn into a person the second that Dream was gone. Cool, I guess, but I don't understand why he would have picked that form. You know what I mean? If you're able to become a person, no offense to Steven, but if I got to choose the person I would become, I don't know.
I don't know, unsuspecting. I don't know, unassuming.
Maybe, yeah, you're right. Maybe, and he's kind of like a warm figure too. And as a place, he's this beautiful field of green, and
something else, and I'm sure there's probably much more about them. Oh, jets,
air and water show,
air and water show. The house of weird roommates that he lives with. Now, there's a lot going on there with those characters. They're all almost very mysterious, and I think there's a whole other layer of what's really going on. But something that really bothered me was that at the end there, the guy who owned the house, it just seemed like he was going to move in with what's her face and her brother, and like just live with them. And then I think you actually see them all living together in this mansion afterwards.
Yeah.
That just all seemed very weird to me.
You know what? Yeah, that was probably, I feel like the hodgepodge of those characters living in the house was really just meant to be for their dreams, and how the vortex then got to see all their dreams in that last episode kind of swirling together. And don't get me wrong, every time Martin Tenbones showed up, I was on board. I don't know if you remember Barbie's dreams, but she this
right
fantasy figure, Martin Tenbones. And this is actually something that really I enjoyed, that touched upon kind of what I did in my novel, and that how people dream in different genres, and ultimately how she's dreaming in like this fantasy world.
And
he's kind of dreaming in more, or our drag queen is dreaming in more of the spectacle and being a showman. I did enjoy that, and I think how divergent those characters were allowed for the melding of dreams that otherwise would not have ever met.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point.
The vortex was cool. Seeing them get sucked into that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But the one character that I guess the veiled girls, I didn't really understand.
No. And it's stuff like that where I'm thinking there's more to their backstories.
Right. Especially with that strangeness in her dream where she keeps, as a child, reciting like the same three lines, this looping story.
Right.
And then her older version is able to continue it on. Or I think I'm mixing that up. It's the old one that does it. But anyways, I wasn't clear on what was going on there. Maybe it's just dream weirdness. And I do think that's the sort of thing that might turn people off that aren't cool with the abstract like we are, more. But yeah, I hope the veiled ladies do have a little more meaning. I don't know how Ken and Barbie have much more meaning, though. Honestly.
I don't know. I think they're just showing that whole weird side of like just people having trust issues, and they carry that over into their dreams, and then ultimately they were right, unfortunately, that he is cheating on her in his dreams left and right.
In his dreams he's doing
correct that. No, that's my point, is that it's weird that he is the one who's cheating on her in his dreams.
But in a weird way, she might have set that up. It might, because we don't know how dreams work. That's what to me, dreams are the most mysterious thing out there, because I don't believe in any sort of belief system, if you will, but I always have argued that dreams are the only strangeness that we all experience, same phenomena we all have that really science cannot quite explain yet. Certainly there are theories, and one of them does involve like it's a imprinting of the previous day in an abstract way. And Barbie did put it in Ken's mind that, I bet she was nice to you. So we don't know if he would have actually been dreaming that salaciousness if she hadn't put that. If she hadn't
even put it in his mind. That's very interesting and a really good point about how people can't really understand or fully explain. I mean, I barely remember my dreams to begin with. Like, I know some people have.
I remember them.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, it's all very fascinating, and I think that's why this show is successful and why it was number one. I don't know why people try to make everything on Netflix seem like, this is the new this is the new Stranger Things. This just beats Stranger Things. Like, well, that's because
it's not the new Stranger Things.
No, it's
Stranger Things has been out for 2 months.
And I'm afraid when you do that, you're setting up your audience for failure, because you might go in there being like, that they said this is the new Stranger Things, and you might not like it, and now you didn't even give the series a chance. So they're kind of hurting themselves by their whole rating system. You go in there, this is #1 this week. I get it. They're like, oh, we want you to watch that. Everyone else is. But don't try to top yourself.
Right. No, I agree. It's really nothing like Stranger Things.
Nothing.
Yeah, I think there's completely different audiences for both of those shows.
Right.
But I do have hope for it. I do have hope for it, and I look forward to the next season. Yeah. Especially because I want more. Jed was such a fun character. I want to. Oh, and we didn't even talk about his dreams, and then dealing with the shape-shifting nightmare that escaped.
Right.
That was fun, right? Where he is the Sandman in his own dreams and kind of escaping the woes of his real world and being abused by his stepfather.
Yeah,
he has full control. That was fun.
I really liked that storyline, and I really liked how that once a nightmare came there to protect him.
I know. That's the beauty of the Corinthian. Is like you can't hate the Corinthian because he actually does have valid points at times. I mean, granted, not killing people and popping off their eyeballs.
Right.
But at the same time, just the will to go on and the will to have autonomy. In a weird way, he is the Lucifer to Dream's God. Ultimately the Corinthian is, if Dream is God and he made the Corinthian just wants that same autonomy. I felt like he was a really interesting character, and I'm glad we got him, and I want him back.
Right. Yeah. I think you will. I think you will see a continuation of some of those stories that almost felt like they were tied up. So I think maybe there's freedom.
Ghost Baby being a big one. What happens with Ghost Baby?
That's.
I hated that storyline.
I did too.
Nothing for me.
Very weird.
Okay, I was talking to Mara about the possibility that it wasn't Hector that put the baby in Lita, that it might have been Desire again.
Yeah, absolutely, because it doesn't make sense that someone who's not only dead and she's only keeping him alive through a dream would have that type of power. And
the only
she
other
controls
person
that power.
To have had that happen to them while they were sleeping, getting pregnant, was Unity.
Yeah.
So based on that, one might suggest this. Otherwise, it is a Ghost Baby, and I don't like that. I hope it's Desire pretending to be Hector.
Then there's no point. Then there's no point to that.
Oh, no.
There's no
Although
payoff.
I do like how Dream is all like, I'm coming back for it. He's a Rumpelstiltskin sort of figure at that point,
Right.
Or you remember that movie was The Witch that we watched with Naomi Rapis, where the old lady comes back for the kid when it's older. I dig that. I hope we see Lita get hers, because she was the least consistent character, I guess, next to Johnny, what we talked about was kind of hypocritical, because at the end then she's like, no, you need to stand up to Dream so I can keep my baby.
Right.
But if she stands up to Dream, then everything is destroyed. So it's like,
your baby won't come to fruition.
Rose at times was not explicit enough about what was going on, specifically to Lita, and that drove me crazy. It was just like, here's another scene for Lita to have for no reason.
Right.
I just wasn't a huge fan of Lita. I'm sorry.
We'll see. We will see what happens. And
yes,
I know I said I had my issues with it, but I will definitely continue it because I am curious and have faith in Neil Gaiman's storytelling abilities. So I will continue to dream that it will end up better.
And while you're dreaming, be sure to stay alive.